Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Children Come First with Dr. Daria Brzezinski. And today we have on our program a very special guest who is the director. Is that correct? Director?
The director, right?
All right. Of the school in Maine. His name is Arnie Greenburg. Good morning.
Good morning.
And he is going to be talking to us about a school called the Liberty School in Maine. Now, Arnie, give us a little bit of background about you. How many years have you been an educator? I think you were in Pennsylvania at one point in your life, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I've been an educator for 35 years. I was involved in the Mequon School in Philadelphia, where I taught 5th and 6th grade, and then I started upper school. The Mequon Upper School. It's now called the Crefeld School, and I was director there for 8 years, and that school is now in its 30th year. And after that, I created the Deep Run School of Homesteading and Community in York, Pennsylvania.
What is that school?
It was the Deep Run School of Homesteading.
Deep Run.
About learning self-sufficiency skills. It was a post-high school, a 13th year.
Is it EPRON?
Pardon?
How do you spell that?
Deep Run. DEEPRUN. Run. That's no longer going, but Liberty School is planning to start a 13th year next year.
Okay.
So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then for about 12 years, I was a baker and ran a cafe in both New Jersey and here in Blue Hill, Maine. And I consider the cafe as much of a school as it was a cafe, because that's where people came and had discussions, and we had nationally known musicians, folk music, and jazz there on a regular basis. So it was a place where people came and discussed and heard good music, all that. And then I started Liberty School 4 years ago. We're in our third year, but it took a year to get it organized. And that's where we are.
Now, Liberty School is in Maine.
Blue Hill, Maine.
And can you tell us a little bit about, first give us some background about Maine. Maine has voucher schools, doesn't it?
Well, it doesn't officially have a voucher system. However, for years, it had what, they don't call it a voucher system, but in reality it is. It is any town that doesn't have its own high school, those towns will pay the tuition to any school that a student wants to go to. So in Blue Hill, which did not have its own high school, we got approved by the state Department of Education to receive tuition from sending towns. So any student in Maine who lives in a town that doesn't have its own high school, that town will pay the tuition. And that's basically a voucher system.
Definitely. And that's because Maine is so rural.
Right. And so, in a sense, the students who live in a town that doesn't have a high school have school choice, and the students who live in a town that does have a high school, they do not have school choice. They have to go to the high school in that town. So that's why it's not a really pure voucher system.
So Liberty School then was created because your town didn't have a school?
Well, it had another school that was also an independent school that received tuition, George Stevens Academy. Been around for over 100 years. It's a traditional school, and we felt there was a need in the area for a non-traditional school that offered students another way of learning. And so we were created by myself and a group of parents who wanted to give students another way of learning.
And what is the philosophy? What is the other way of learning?
We call ourselves a democratic learning community. And the philosophy of the school is that we believe students learn best when they're pursuing things they're interested in, following their passions and their desires rather than a predetermined curriculum. That all students have to take 10th grade English or 11th grade English, and there's a prescribed curriculum. in a democratic school, we really help students determine their own goals and determine what they want to work on. And that's what we do. So students get a lot of choices of courses that are being offered and can also initiate their own courses.
Can you define for us how a day might look like at Liberty School, and what are the ages of the students?
What a day would look like?
Yeah. I mean,
we are a high school, 9th grade to 12th grade. We call ourselves a college for high school students, because the way we're structured is exactly the way a college is structured. We have an open campus. If a student doesn't have a class till 10 o'clock, they don't have to be in school at 10 o'clock till 10 o'clock. If they're finished by noon or 1, they can leave. If they have time between classes, they can leave. Certain classes are offered on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Other classes are on Tuesday and Thursday. Each student works out his or her own schedule. And so it's really exactly the way colleges are. We believe that the open campus, the selecting of courses, is the best preparation for college and life, because they're getting experience in managing their time. That's why we do that.
What do you have? Do you have students with core curriculum choices?
Core?
Yeah, core curriculum.
We don't really have a core curriculum. Students we offer English courses, and students can choose from 8 or 9 English courses that are offered each term, a certain number of history courses, science courses, math courses, or they can make up a course and do it independently with a teacher. But we don't have core courses in the traditional sense.
Why do you call it Liberty?
Why do we call the school Liberty?
Yes.
That's a good question. We call it Liberty because we want students to have the freedom, like out of the Declaration of Independence, the freedom to pursue happiness. Our philosophy is that the goal of education is happiness, to be self-aware, self-fulfilled, empowered, encouraged to pursue one's own interests and passions. And so we believe that a good school really prepares people to do the things that make them happy, rather than necessarily going on to college, which is fine, or doing things that they think they're supposed to do. We really want students to really learn what it is they really would love to do, and be encouraged to do that. That's an unalienable right. And so Liberty is the perfect title for the school.
What is a democratic learning community?
What is the what?
How do you define a democratic learning community?
A democratic learning community is a place where students are expected to practice democracy by being involved in every aspect of running the school. Students are on committees. There's a admissions committee, a curriculum committee, a hiring committee. There's a community council that runs the school. Most schools teach about democracy, but don't practice it. Most schools are really dictatorship, and students are told what to do and don't really have much control or say on what happens. At Liberty School, in our democratic learning community, our students really run the school. They really, along with the teachers, they participate actively in every aspect of the school. So it's democratic in that sense. The other way it's democratic is, though they were an independent school, the towns pay the tuition, so the people don't have to be able to afford to come to it. Really democratic in that anybody can come.
So you have a totally different philosophy. You're a high school, and you allow the students to. How can there not be chaos when you allow students to run the school? Don't they get out of hand? I mean, are there?
Not at all. We have virtually no discipline problems because there are no rules to break, and whatever policies and rules we do have, which are minimal, our rules that the students all agreed to. And they also agreed to the consequences if there should be any infractions. But sometimes the students say the worst thing about the school is that there's nothing to rebel against. The only reason you have discipline problems in schools is when you have arbitrary rules. The students respect each other. It's relaxed but rigorous, and so it really runs very smoothly. There's no chaos at all.
That would seem to run contrary to most people's thinking about having to have. Why is it that when children are allowed to design their own curriculum, that they are able to, and their own rules, that they are not unruly? What is it about children that creates that to happen?
Well, there's a favorite quote of mine by Ralph Emerson, which is, "The secret of education lies in respecting the pupil." And the students, you could ask any student in the school, and they feel genuinely respected. They feel ownership over their education. They feel that it's their school, and they care about the school. Want to make sure that it's successful, that there are good students in the school, because that is serious students in the school. Plus, it just makes going to school that much more exciting.
What kinds of qualities do the Liberty School graduates have?
Pardon?
What kinds of qualities do students who graduate from your school have? Now, you've been in the business now.
One of the things we did right in the beginning, before we even started the school, while we were discussing the school, was to talk about what do we want our graduates to be? What kind of people do we want? Do we think would make us proud of our graduates? And we talked about the kinds of qualities, human qualities of being joyful about learning, being lifelong learners, being courageous, being caring people. These were the qualities that we wanted our graduates, our students, to develop. And there were two things we did. One, we tried to hire teachers who possess those qualities. All of our teachers are excellent human beings. They're adventurous, they're joyful, lifelong learners, they're caring, very conscious of their place in the world. And so the students every day are coming in contact with people that they can emulate. And that was part of it. And the idea of being caring about one another is an essential quality in a community. We were democratic learning. We are a community of learners, and community is also important. It's easy to call yourself a community, but it's another thing to be one. And being in a community means that there's caring and concern for the welfare of every person in that community, and that's something that we really pay a lot of attention to.
Do you also relate to your community as far as your town goes, your surrounding community?
We're very involved in our community. Community service is a very important part of the school. Every student has to be involved in some community service project, and there's a minimum number of hours that we expect. That gets people try community service that never would have done it before. And we find that most of the students, once they start serving in the community, they enjoy it. We had some students who just finished a community service at a place, and they said they're going to do it for the whole summer. They enjoyed it so much. And we also invite people in the community to take classes with our students. All of our courses are advertised in the town newspaper, and anybody who wants to come in and sit in the Civil War course, or a course in Romanticism, or a course in fiction writing or poetry writing, any of the courses that we offer, people from the community are welcome to join us, and some do, not a whole lot. This is during the work day and things, but some people come in.
Now, what times do you offer your courses? You said it was like a college campus, and most college campuses offer courses at night and on weekends.
Right now, we're not offering courses on weekends, but we've been talking about offering some of our courses later in the day and in the evening, so that people in the community could take part. We haven't done that yet.
How do you? So you have a democratic setting. You obviously are the director. You have teachers, and it sounds to me like you have the community and the parents, and everyone is involved in this process.
Right.
Now, we can't speak for your school because it's only been 4 years old, but in your experience at Mequon and the school you were in York, Pennsylvania, what is the benefit of students having a say in their curriculum, a choice, and having this democratic learning style? What are the benefits of it as compared to perhaps traditional?
I think the main benefit is sometimes people feel in their lives that there's nothing they can do about their situation in society. At Liberty School, students learn that if they take action and can change things, they feel empowered. So I think the value of being involved in a democratic learning community and being encouraged to, if there's something you want to see change or something you would like to see, that you're encouraged to go after that, to either come to a community council meeting or talk to your advisor or a teacher or get a group of kids together to organize for something. And the sense of being empowered is a very, very important part of what we're trying to teach, that it's your life and you have to take ownership of it. And if there's something that it's not enough to say, I don't like something. If you don't like something, what are you going to do about it?
So
that's why we think that's important.
You are listening to Children Come First. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski. We're here today with Arnold Greenburg from the Liberty School in Maine. And to continue with, let's give some phone numbers here. The Liberty School, you can reach Arnie at 207-374-2886 at the Liberty School, 207-374-2886, or you can call us here toll free at 877-PRO-KIDS. That's 877-PRO-KIDS. Arnie, I know your email isn't working. Do you want to give out an email address
it's
or
working
website?
Now.
Oh, is it?
Yep, I just got a new computer and got it hooked up. It's I'll give my one at home. It's GRNBRG. It's Greenberg without the E's. GRNBRG at downeast.net.
Okay. For those who are listening, Arnold Greenberg's email address is grnbrg at downeast.net. Do you have a website for the school?
We do. On my head, I can remember the address of that, but we do have one.
It's probably www.libertyschool.com, but they can email you to find it out. Let's continue on with Liberty School and preparing children for the 21st century. And you talked about empowering them and their ownership of their life in a society where we have most people who are dependent and feeling powerless and hopeless and victimized. This is a real dramatic change from the kinds of students that are being put out by our public schools today. How are they going to compete? For example, your students have, they choose the kinds of courses that they want. How can they possibly take anything like testing, SATs and things of that nature? Is there any testing in Maine? Are there any standards in Maine?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are. There's the state MEA exam that's given in 11th grade. It's a kind of a test for accountability. Most of our students take the SATs. And usually do very well on them. Students take a lot of English, history, math courses. Our emphasis is not on the content, but on skill, on how to be a student, how to read creatively and critically, how to find information and use information, evaluate information, and equally important, present information in a clear way. These are the kinds of skills that young people are going to need in the future. Another very important skill that we develop in our students is the ability to collaborate. Collaborating rather than competing is essential for the 21st century. People are going to learn to have to be problem solvers, being able to digest the vast amount of information that is coming to them over the internet and through other media. And so no longer is it useful to have students memorize information. Students have to be able to retrieve information, evaluate, and use it creatively. So having students collaborate on projects together, solve problems together, is a big emphasis in the school. One other thing I think that is important in the 21st century, in the world we're living in, is that the world is changing so rapidly that often a job that a person is trained for becomes obsolete within 5 years. So what is it that we can do to help students cope with a world that is changing so rapidly and is so filled with often contradictory information? The most important thing we believe at Liberty School is that helping people have a stronger sense of who they are, what their values are, how they want to live, of a stronger sense of self. Because if you have a strong sense of self, then you're able to adapt to changes and go with the flow of things much better than if you think that you're secure with just having a job and knowing how to do your job. It's more important to know who you are and what your values are and what you stand for.
And that way you can speak to other people and be able to communicate in various ways and with the public, in business, and in many other ways. As the director of the school, are you also a teacher? Do you keep in close contact with your students?
Oh, I do. I love to teach. I couldn't survive there if I couldn't teach a few courses each term, which I do, and I also work with students independently. A lot of students. No student has to take courses. If a student has ideas on an independent, that they want to study independently, each of our teachers has a lot of time available to work with students independently. I'll get back to the question of what I teach in a minute, but a unique feature in the school, and I think there are teachers listening and administrators, this is interesting. Our teachers teach only 2 classes a day, whereas in most schools, teachers are teaching 6, 7 classes a day. By teaching 2 classes a day, usually 2 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and 2 on Tuesday and Thursday, that gives teachers the time to meet with students individually, to collaborate with their colleagues, to study, and also to feel a sense of leisure. I don't think people realize that the true meaning in Greek of the word school is leisure, and it's something that is absent in most schools. So we try to provide leisure both for students and teachers to really be able to learn things in depth and not feel so stressed out.
So you don't cover a variety of different subjects like the shopping mall, traditional high schools. You cover things much more in depth, is that correct?
We do. However, let me give you an example of some of the courses we offer. A student can take we're a trimester, so the courses change 3 times a year. And some of the courses that are offered are creation myths. I taught a course last term called The History of Love. There's courses in history, and they call it the history of baseball or the history of rock and roll, where kids are studying things that they're really interested in. But we're talking about topics that are of interest, but while they're doing it, they're really learning how to read and learning how to write. And though it doesn't appear to be that way, we're really a school that's skill-oriented, that the skills of how to read, how to write, how to be a student, how to solve problems. Our courses are very rigorous, and we don't emphasize memorizing. The way a student demonstrates that they know something is they have to teach it. You have to present it to their students, other students in the class. There's a lot of demonstration of knowledge rather than taking multiple choice tests.
And you feel that demonstrating what you know is much more significant in not only letting the teacher and those others know the kind of information that you've gleaned, but also to reinforce the learning itself.
Absolutely. To explain something to someone else, you really have to really know it and understand it, and to be able to answer questions. Plus, in a community, you want to be sharing what you know. The importance of sharing and collaborating is what makes the school a learning community. It's not a factory where we're stamping out students. This is a community where we're a community of learners, where we're learning and sharing from each other. I define myself, and in all of my classes, and most of the teachers do, I define myself as an older student. When I teach a class, whether it's a writing class or a literature class, and we discuss as a group what paper we're going to do for next week, I do all the assignments. When there's a paper assigned, I write the paper also. And I see myself as a model. I'm a more experienced learner, and so they learn from how I go about doing things, how to be a student. And I also say, as an older student, I expect you to be as prepared for class as you expect me to be. And that's the standard. The students are sharing the responsibilities for the class. It's not that the teacher is the one that has to just give out information to passive recipients, as we're all learning together.
As an observer of this, it would appear to people who are entrenched and ingrained in the traditional system that you are more affective than you are curriculum-based.
Right.
And the underlying principles are to teach students skills related to the things they enjoy. In other words, when you like something and you enjoy it, you are more apt to learn the kinds of skills that lead to your progressing on to learning more things and having the kinds of resources you need for critical thinking skills and to go on. Is that correct?
Right, and they're using them daily in their work. Yep. The idea of having the skills is we're trying to have students become lifelong learners. And the only way to become a lifelong learner is have the skill of learning, going off and getting material, reading well and critically, as I said before, and knowing how to use the information.
Why shouldn't we're going down in our last 5 minutes here on this half hour, and I didn't want to I have some in-depth subjects I'd like to get into. What is the benefit of a child who is happy and joyful about learning? I mean, we seem to be talking about something that might appear to other people as being airy-fairy or something like that. And what is the benefit of having to care and joy? I mean, we're talking about intangible qualities here, joy and happiness and democracy and liberty and caring and adventurous and courageous. These are all terms that I wouldn't identify in a traditional school at all. What are the benefits of having those kinds of qualities available to students in school?
Well, one of the things we say about the about one of our goals, and this is important, is that we want our students to achieve not only academic excellence, but human excellence. And that's a major goal in the school, is not just academic excellence, which we really strive for, and we have very high standards and expectations of what we expect, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But human excellence is just as important. They go hand in hand.
Arnie, I'm going to cut you off for a second here because we have to go to our break.
Okay.
This is Children Come First. Don't miss that. Don't lose that thought. We are here today with Arnold Greenburg from the Liberty School in Maine. Phone number 207-374-2886. That's 207-374-2886. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski. And please join us for our second half hour, and we're going to be talking a lot more about the Liberty School in Maine, a democratic learning community. You may reach us at Children Come First, toll free, at 877-PRO-KIDS. That's 877-PROKIDS. Or you can email us at PROKIDS@RLC.net. That's PROKIDS@RLC.net. Please join us in our second half hour. We'll be talking to Arnie Greenburg from the Liberty School in Maine. We're here at our second half, a democratic learning community. And I'm sorry we had to interrupt you, Arnie, but you know what happens. We have to identify the people who are sponsoring us. You talked about the difference between academic excellence and human excellence. I'd really like you to talk about that a little bit more, because this is what Liberty School is all about.
It's a very important element in education. I mean, it's teachers and parents. I really consider parents to be the primary educators. But as teachers, our goal is really to help young people grow up into being happy, productive, caring citizens in the world. And so just academic excellence by itself is not enough. And I remember a quote I like by Voltaire, French philosopher, who was asked by someone, how can I make the world a better place? And Voltaire's answer was, go plant your garden. And by that he meant, if each of us went out and planted our garden or did the things that made us happy as individuals, then the world would be a better place. It's very simple. And somehow we have come to believe that happiness is something that comes later. And our schools postpone that. They say, well, if you do this and you do that, then in the future you'll have a successful career and you'll be able to have everything you want. And so we're conditioned to postpone happiness. Our feeling is that you have to be happy every day doing what you love to do, and that happiness has to be an important ingredient in your life. That's not to say that every day you're going to be happy. There's going to be problems and upsets and things that don't go the way you expect, and that's just part of being alive. But for some reason in our puritanical society and the work ethic that we have been conditioned to accept, is that we postpone our happiness.
I wonder why we do that.
Huh?
It doesn't seem logical.
It is not logical, but it's just the way things seem to be. And I remember in school I was just being told, you may not enjoy this now, but one day you'll be glad that you learned this. We're always working towards the future. And that's true. The future, but the future comes out of the present. If everybody could be feeling fulfilled in the present, it's inevitable that they're going to feel fulfilled in the future. But if people are not feeling fulfilled and happy in the present, and think that if I do this and I do that, then I'll be happy, that might be an illusion. I'm sure people could argue with that, but that's our philosophy.
Well, it seems to me that what has happened in your school is, we know that our current system of education is 150 years old, and that it was based in creating workers for industrial America and the assembly line, and we still refer to our children as products, assessment, and the machine mentality, when that is no longer equitable and relating to the kind of children that we have today and the kinds of needs that we have in our society today. So the idea of shifting our perception from this idea of the assembly line factory model, treating children as a product, to having them be a garden. I mean, this is not an old, I know kindergartens, the word kindergarten started as the same philosophy and mentality. How can we shift people from thinking, when it's been so ingrained in our society for 150 years? How can we, I mean, most people who will be listening to you will be saying, oh, that's flaky, but what you're saying is absolutely true and needs to be integrated in our schools.
Absolutely.
So how can we change people's thinking?
Well, it's really sad to say that so many aspects of our society have changed dramatically, and that the aspect of our society that has changed the slowest and the least are the schools. And I hope I don't insult anybody when I say this, but I think that many teachers and many schools are afraid of the children. They're afraid of chaos. They're afraid of losing control. They're afraid. There's a lot of fear in our schools, and they have become very negative and punitive places. And I couldn't document this, but I have a feeling that a lot of the violence that is in schools, a lot of the vandalism that is in schools, even the bomb threats that are in school, is related to the repressive atmosphere. The other thing is that there's been abundant research that demonstrates that people learn in many different ways, and that the way we have been expecting students to learn in school is really not the way people learn in real life. And you mentioned kindergarten. Watching students, young children, play, and with their trucks or their blocks or their dolls or whatever things that they play with, they're learning. And if sometimes I think the best model for a high school might be the kindergarten or the nursery school, where kids are allowed to play. That's the other meaning of the word school, by the way, is leisure and play. The chance to play with knowledge, to play with ideas, to play with aspects of nature. If we could return play, cool, but we're so afraid, our schools are so afraid of not having order, that and there's this distrust of children that permeates, so that my experience in 35 years of education and working with children in this way, that it's joyful. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's so much fun when you can relate to children as people, little people, and not something to be afraid of.
I don't want to get into this too deeply, but I personally have a bias that many of our perceptions on children are based in one particular philosophical premise, I should say theological premise, that we are born sinful. And in so conceiving and in so creating the mentality that somehow we are all born imperfect and marred, creates this huge monster of a perception about children, and the fact that they are somehow in need of our control, in order to be able to guide them on the path to being perfect people. And it's not that I'm debasing religion or anything of that nature, but I think it's the underlying premise of our society, and that somehow or other we are not God's children. We are imperfect, and we are, in need of sitting in a box and putting us out like cookie cutters.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's an assumption on the nature of children. My assumption, and I think yours is also, is that we're learning animals. We are an animal, and and that curiosity and the desire to learn is inherent, and we can see that most children learn a tremendous amount by the time they're 3 years old, learning how to speak, learning how to walk, learning how to communicate is an amazing amount of learning, and I've seen children in other countries where there are much more other languages, learning 5 and 6 languages by the time they're 7 or 8 years old. So students are capable of much more learning than we allow, and we kind of really squelch that and try to control that.
5 to 6 languages is an awful lot.
Pardon?
5 to 6 languages is an awful lot.
I've seen children who can speak, 8 and 9 years old, who can speak 5 or 6 languages.
That's amazing. What can we do? We are also in our society, and I know that this is something your school has a different philosophical premise about. Our society is based on competition. We see it in sports, we see it in business, and yet more and more I talk to business people who are asking that we stop producing children who compete, but who in fact learn teamwork and how to collaborate.
Exactly.
And we don't induce this by the structure that we have in our schools, in our traditional schools.
Right.
What do you do? How do students learn collaboration at Liberty School?
Well, many ways. It's the way we set up our classes, the way the teachers present material, or present how we're going to approach the material. We just create the atmosphere where it's project-oriented and discussion-oriented rather than any other way. And we get so many visitors to the school, and who have come from other schools, visiting round school teachers, student teachers, parents. And this has been, what I'm going to say has been a consistent observation. When people come to Liberty School to visit and sit on classes, and we're very open to visitors, anybody can come and just sit in a class. They say the students are so engaged. They're talking and they're listening to each other, and the engagement. And he said that when they go to other schools, the students are quiet. They're listening to the teacher, and if there's a question asked, generally the question is this going to be on the test? That's the question. At Liberty School, it's never a question. I had a new student who came to my school was in my class for the first time last term, and I've heard this goes on in other classes. For a while, because we're having discussions, the student said, all we do in this class is think. And this student came from a traditional school where all she was asked to do was memorize. And she was used to that, so there's a process of now she's really flourishing and happy, but it took her a while to get used to the idea that we are not asking her to memorize for tests.
So it's not impossible then to bring in students from traditional classrooms who have been there for 10 years and be able to change their mindset to be able to think in these ways?
There's sometimes there's a transition period, but usually it doesn't take very long. So many of the students who've come to our school have been successful students in their other schools, A, B, honor roll students, who felt they were being stifled, that they were just going through the motion. They were getting A's with very little effort by basically figuring out what the teacher wanted. At Liberty School, it's not an issue to figure out what the teacher wants. It's how can I do this, and how about if I do this project, and I'd like to work on this. It's a completely different mindset. So the students who come feel liberated for the most part.
Now, this is Children Come First. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski. We're here today with Arnold Greenburg, who is director of Liberty School in Maine. If you'd like more information, you may reach him about the Liberty School. You may call him at area code 207-374-2886, or you can call us at Children Come First at toll-free 877-PRO-KIDS. That's 877-PROKIDS. You were talking earlier, Arnie, about allowing people, the community, to come into the classroom to take courses, as well as the community at large to outsiders, the parents, to come into the classroom to observe.
Oh, yeah.
Most traditional teachers are threatened by outsiders who come in.
Mm-hmm. We're not.
How can we transition? And we all know that having family and community as part of the school is extremely important. How do you train your teachers to not be threatened by people who come in from the outside?
Well, we're not a fear-driven school. We're enjoying what we're doing, and and students, visitors often. The other thing, as so many visitors have said, is how welcoming the students are. When a visitor comes, the students go right up to them and say, "Hi there, can I show you around? What would you like to do?" And when they come into classes to sit down, they always introduce themselves, and so people feel very welcomed. The students feel very proud of the school and really like showing it off, and not in a performance way. We never put on a pretty face. We never put on a show. We are who we are, how we are, and we don't have anything to hide. Sometimes some days are better than others, but the students usually are very really love when visitors come, and the teachers do too.
Now, when we're talking, I'd like to go into a discussion on something because I think it's before we end this program, and that is the 13th year program you have at Liberty School. What is the 13th year?
Well, the 13th year is a post-high school experience for students who are not quite sure what the next step should be. So much, I'll call it social engineering, has taken place in our society, where our students are being trained and expected to go into the workforce and now go into corporate America or the global economy. And there are many people who are doing that because they don't know what else to do, that there aren't any other options. So the 13th year is an experience to work on a farm, learn how to grow your own food, canning, preserving, working with livestock, building solar houses. One of the students would be building passive solar shelters, working, there's a big component of apprenticeships, working with potters and furniture makers and fishermen and aquaculture and woods people, wood carvers, so that people may want to have a more home-centered life. When we talk about homesteading, we're not talking about homesteading in the 19th century sense of going back to the land by itself. It's more and more people want to create cottage industries and now with computers, it's possible that a person does not have to work in an office or a big corporate. They can do a lot of their work at home and communicate at home. And so the 13th year is encouraging students to become more self-sufficient. We're becoming more vulnerable. The global economy is very vulnerable, and students become, young people, all of us become much more so dependent on the global economy. Just what's happening with the price of gas and oil fluctuating. So the 13th year is an opportunity for students to say, there's another way. I could live in this way. Then they can either go on to college with that consciousness behind them, those skills of how to take care of oneself behind them, and continue living a so-called, what I call living alongside of society rather than in it. And the other thing is that with the issues that we're facing, environmental issues, overpopulation, possible food shortages worldwide, there has to be a new consciousness of how to live on the planet, to live simpler lives. So there's some people, not all people, some people want to have that option. I mean, if a person wants to go into corporate America and work in the global economy and live in New York City, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm not making any judgment. I'm just concerned that there are a number of students who feel that they have to go on to college because that's what's expected and there aren't any other options. It's just providing an option.
And it's a wonderful option because it gives them the kind of skills and gives them the time. For some people who may not be ready to go on to college yet or really understand, it gives them another year, an opportunity to
We're also open to people of any age who have been in mainstream America and who would like to find a way out. And so having the opportunity to work on a farm and work on an apprentice and try it for a year or 6 months is a wonderful opportunity. So people 35 or 40 or 50 come to this 13th year. A 13th year is not limited to somebody in high school.
Now I'm going to go a little backwards because I wanted you to talk about that because I think it's a very significant point to make.
What? I'm having trouble hearing you.
I wanted to, what must a student do to graduate?
What must a student do to graduate?
Yes.
I think this is one of the most interesting parts of our school. And I'm glad to talk about this. Our students to graduate can graduate anytime they think they're ready to graduate. 10th grade, 11th grade. They have to petition the community council. It's made up of students and teachers. They think they're ready to graduate. And they have to demonstrate, get a letter from their advisor that they have met all the requirements of the state. All students to graduate have to have 4 years of English and 2 years of math and all the things that are required for graduation. We're required to do that as an approved school. Although we have a lot of flexibility in how we do that. The exciting part of it is that they have to present a graduation project around an essential question, a very broad question, like what is education? What is happiness? What does it mean to be free? What is the relationship between art and architecture? There's a multitude of questions. And a student has to present a project to the school that demonstrates their understanding and knowledge of all this of what we have been trying to teach. They demonstrate their knowledge and their skills, how to present something, how to write a paper, how to explore a question in depth. We call it a rite of passage. Every culture from the beginning of time has had a rite of passage. Native American children have to demonstrate that they can live for several days, maybe a week, in the wilderness. that they have learned the skills of survival. Many other cultures have different kinds of rites of passage that marks going from childhood to adulthood. In Judaism, the bar mitzvah is a rite of passage where they teach a lesson to their community. And so our graduation is a rite of passage graduation project. The presentation of it is a very major presentation that demonstrates that they have mastered the skills necessary to be a lifelong learner. And that's what the graduation project. A student will not graduate unless they can demonstrate that.
Now, we are at the last few minutes here of our program. Do you have anything you'd like to say to our audience in summing up the function or the philosophy of the Liberty School and the democratic learning community, or is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to convey to our audience?
Well, one thing I wanted to say is that we don't give grades. School students get written evaluations and have to write self-evaluations. Students either get credit for a course or no credit. The no credits don't become part of their official record, because usually when a student doesn't get credit, it means he didn't put any real effort into it, stopped coming, did lackadaisical work. One of the things that we try to think of our school is like, you're coming to work. You're working as a student, so that coming to class regularly, on time, prepared, is essential. And doing all of everything that we've agreed to do. And it's like going to work. We say to a student, what would happen if you had a job and you showed up late and didn't call, or you just didn't show up at all? And if you did show up, you weren't prepared to work, you were tired, and did lackadaisical work, what we would call C work, you would get fired. So one of the things we do at Liberty School is when a student has missed a couple of classes without an excuse, they get fired. They get dropped from the class. And because it's their education, they're the ones. And we don't chase after them. It's their responsibility to be in their class on time, prepared, as it is their responsibility to be at work on time, prepared to work. And we don't accept C work. You either do your best or you don't get credit.
Much like the real world.
You try to have high expectations, because when a person is not doing his or her share of the work in a class, really letting everybody in the class down. It's like being on a team. The idea of collaborating, like on a basketball team, how would the basketball team feel if one of the players just didn't show up for a game, or didn't show up for practice, or when he came, kind of just sat around and didn't really try to work out the plays? So the same kind of qualities of collaboration that one expects on a basketball team, we expect in a classroom. That's, I think, a very important ingredient in the school. And that's why we mean that we're a serious learning community. We don't call ourselves just a learning community, but that we're a serious learning community. We're serious about learning. If you don't want to learn, then go someplace else. If you want to learn, we're here.
That is very serious, to drop a child from your class if they haven't shown up.
It's the student who has done it to himself. The teacher didn't do anything.
That's correct. It's wonderful that you have all these high expectations, and it sounds to me like you are creating very responsible students.
Oh, we are.
Much more so than we have in the past, and I acknowledge you for that.
Yeah.
I also want to say you have a book you've written, haven't you?
I have, yes.
What's the name of it?
It's called Adventures on Arnold's Island.
And what's it about?
Well, it's 4 essays on education. One of them called Arnold's Island was a classroom that I had when I taught 5th and 6th grade, in which we had our own economy backed up by 50 pounds of. So we started with an unfurnished, completely empty classroom and created our own country, which the students named Arnos Island. And we had an economy that